Here's something that's been quietly happening in 2026 that most people are completely sleeping on. The Russell 2000, a basket of 2,000 smaller American companies that almost nobody talks about, is up roughly 22% this year. The S&P 500, up about 7.5%. That's not a small gap. That's the widest margin of small cap outperformance over the S&P in more than 2 decades, the biggest lead since 2003. And the weird thing is, this is happening at the exact same moment that the S&P 500 is sitting at the second most expensive valuation in over 140 years of recorded history. Which raises an obvious question. If the most expensive index in a generation is barely moving and a cheaper, overlooked corner of the market is quietly running circles around it, what does that tell you about the next decade? And more practically, if you had to start completely over right now with fresh capital and no existing positions, what would you actually buy? That's exactly what we're going to work through today. The S&P 500 problem. Let me start by being fair. The S&P 500 is one of the greatest wealth-building tools ever created. Warren Buffett has recommended it to regular people for decades. For most people, over most time periods, buying it and holding is a perfectly solid plan. But here's the thing. The price you pay for any investment is the single biggest driver of the return you get. Buy something cheap, your future returns tend to be great. Buy that exact same thing when it's expensive, your future returns tend to disappoint. And right now, we are buying the S&P 500 at prices that are, by almost every long-term measure, near the most expensive ever recorded. There are 2 major measuring sticks for this. The first is the Buffett Indicator, the total value of the US stock market divided by GDP. Think of it as how expensive is the market relative to the actual size of the economy. Right now, that number sits at approximately 219%, which is roughly 57% above its long-term trend line. For context, at the dot-com peak in 2000, the ratio was around 170%. We are significantly above that now. The second is the Shiller CAPE Ratio, which smooths out earnings over 10 years to give you a cleaner picture of how expensive the market really is. As of mid-2026, the CAPE sits around 41. The only time in over 140 years of recorded history that reading was higher, December 1999, the dot-com peak at 44. So we're not quite at dot-com levels, but we are at the second highest reading in history, well above the 1929 pre-crash level of around 32, well above the 2007 pre-financial crisis peak of around 27. This is genuinely rare territory. Now, here's what most people don't realize. Valuation doesn't predict what happens tomorrow or even next year. The market can stay expensive for a long time, but it is one of the most reliable predictors of what happens over the next decade. Howard Marks, who runs Oak Tree Capital and is one of the most respected institutional investors alive, has cited a JP Morgan chart that makes this point better than almost anything I've seen. The chart covers nearly 30 years of data. Every single month, it shows what the forward PE ratio was at that time and what the S&P 500 actually returned over the following 10 years. The pattern is consistent. When you bought the S&P 500 at a PE of around 23, your 10-year annualized return landed somewhere between positive 2% and negative 2%, every time. Paul Tudor Jones, the investor who famously made around $100 million shorting the market during the 1987 crash, recently said the same thing directly. Buying the S&P 500 at current valuations could lead to negative 10-year returns. These aren't panicked retail traders. These are 2 of the most decorated long-horizon investors in the world, and they're saying the same thing. Now, you might be thinking, well, people have been saying the market is overvalued for years and it just kept going up. That's fair. I'll be honest, the market has been expensive for a while and prices kept climbing anyway. Valuation is not a timing tool. It won't tell you when something breaks, but it does tell you the starting point for long-term returns. And our starting point right now is a historically difficult one. We've seen this movie before. From 2000 to 2012, the S&P 500 went essentially nowhere, flat, 12 years. If you had invested a lump sum at the peak, you'd have spent over a decade going backward after inflation. What actually worked during that lost decade? Here's where it gets really interesting. While the S&P 500 was grinding sideways from 2000 to 2012, something else was happening. The Russell 2000, the index of roughly 2,000 smaller US companies, outperformed meaningfully during that same stretch. Why? Because small caps were cheaper at the starting point, their valuations were more reasonable, and when the math works in your favor from day one, time takes care of the rest. This is the pattern. Let me show you what I mean with actual numbers. If you compare starting periods using dollar-cost averaging, meaning you invest a steady amount every single month regardless of what the market is doing, starting from the peak of the dot-com bubble in 2000, the S&P 500 averaged less than 5% per year over the next 12 years. The Russell 2000 averaged around 7%. On the surface, 2% doesn't sound massive, but over 12 years with compounding, that's roughly 30 percentage points of difference in your final outcome. Now flip it. Start from the bottom of the financial crisis in March 2009, when large cap stocks were dirt cheap and nobody wanted them. The S&P 500 annualized at roughly 15% from that point. The Nasdaq even higher. The Russell 2000 trailed both, because when the larger companies were the cheap ones, they delivered the better returns. The starting valuation decides almost everything. Same two investments, opposite winner, depending entirely on the price you paid when you began. So apply that framework to right now. The S&P 500 is at a Shiller CAPE of 41. The forward PE on the Russell 2000's most popular ETF, IWM, is around 18 to 20 times earnings. For context, the S&P 500's forward PE sits around 21 to 23. The Russell 2000 hasn't traded at a discount this wide relative to large caps since the late 1990s. The research firm Neuberger Berman found that on a trailing PE basis, small caps are currently at a 31% discount to large caps versus a historical average where they typically trade at a slight premium. And here's the thing, this isn't purely theoretical anymore. Look at what's already happening in 2026. The Russell 2000 is up roughly 22% year to date. The S&P 500 is up around 7.5%. That's the widest gap in small cap outperformance since 2003, which, if you look at the history, was right at the beginning of a prolonged period of small cap leadership following the dot-com bubble. This is exactly the kind of rotation that historically follows a period of extreme large cap concentration. The Magnificent Seven stocks, the mega-cap tech names, drove an enormous share of S&P 500 returns for years, and now capital is starting to rotate toward the parts of the market that were left behind. One potential drawback worth naming, small-cap stocks are more volatile. The Russell 2000 can swing harder. During the 2008 financial crisis, it dropped around 40%, so this isn't a low-drama investment. If watching your portfolio drop 30 or 40% keeps you up at night, that's a real consideration. No strategy is perfect, and this one requires a stomach for volatility. So practically, if you agree with the setup, what do? You don't try to call the top of the S&P 500. You don't try to perfectly time the rotation. Nobody rings a bell at the exact moment things shift, and the investors who've tried to nail that timing, including legendary ones, have consistently said it's the hardest part. What you do instead is pick a sensible investment and keep buying it steadily every single month. Dollar cost averaging, same fixed amount regardless of what the market is doing. Here's why that matters, especially with an index like the Russell 2000. When prices drop, your fixed monthly amount buys more shares. When prices rise, you buy fewer. Over time, your average cost tilts toward the cheaper periods, exactly when the future returns are best. Boring? Absolutely. Effective? The data says yes. To own the full Russell 2000, you have two main options. IWM, the iShares Russell 2000 ETF, it's the most liquid, most widely traded, easiest to access. Expense ratio is 0.19%. VTW, the Vanguard Russell 2000 ETF, same index, same 2,000 companies, but the expense ratio is just 0.07%. Over 20 or 30 years, that fee difference compounds in a meaningful way. Both are single-click solutions to owning the entire index. Here's the honest truth that ties all of this together.
The reason most people don't build real wealth in the market isn't that they picked the wrong stocks, it's that they never had a system. They were always one step behind, buying after the run-up, selling after the drop, chasing whatever was hot in last year's headlines. The people who actually build wealth aren't smarter, they just stop guessing and start showing up. If the data is right, if the next decade does favor cheaper, smaller companies the way history suggests it should, you don't need a crystal ball. You just need a decision and the discipline to stick to it when everyone else is still chasing the S&P. Historically, the best performing funds over 10 and 15-year periods almost always went through stretches of being near the bottom of the pack, because buying what's cheap and unpopular and holding through the discomfort, that's literally how you set yourself up for the rebound. The game isn't being right on every quarter, it's owning the right things at the right price and letting time do the heavy lifting. So if I had to start over today with fresh capital and I could only pick one thing, I'd look very hard at the Russell 2000. Not because it's a guarantee, not because it can't go down, but because the math of starting valuation, the historical precedent from the last time we were in a setup like this, and the rotation that's already underway all point in the same direction. Dollar cost average into it, keep buying on the down months, and stop trying to predict what the market does next month. If you've been sitting on the sidelines trying to time this perfectly, the best time to start was 5 years ago. The second best time is now. If this video helped clarify the setup for you, hit the like button. It helps more people find this content. And check out the video linked here on how to actually structure a simple dollar cost averaging plan from scratch. Thanks for watching.